Stones. Thank you for joining us for today's CCA webinar, Understanding Malicious Mobile Threats and How to Mitigate Abuse in the Network, which is sponsored by CCA member CloudMark. My name is Lucy Tutwiler. I'm Vice President of Media and Communications here with CCA, and I'll be moderating the session today. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen. We're going to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions while the presentation is going on, please just type them in as you think of them, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Today's presenter is Mike Redding, who's the Vice President of Technology Services at CloudMark. Mike has over 15 years of experience delivering messages and messaging security solutions to service providers, mobile operators, and Fortune 500 companies. And he has led the development of CloudMark's anti-abuse policy best practices and sender reputation strategies. Mike's here with us today to talk about the latest trends and attacks and ways to alleviate message abuse in the network. So now, without further ado, Mike, I'll turn it over to you for the presentation.
Thank you, Lucy. Hold on one second. So just a quick overview of some of the things we're going to cover today. I want to start with a high-level overview of the types of trends we see in mobile messaging threats. We've been studying mobile messaging for over 7 years, so we've seen these threats grow from a relatively insignificant problem to one of the major problems that almost all mobile operators deal with today. We'll take a look at how SMS is changing, how its usage is changing, and what the impact of that may be to mobile operators, and in particular, how that may change the types of abuse that we see. We're going to go through several different examples of abuse that have caused significant impact to operators. Dig into those in a little bit of detail and understand really what's behind the motivation behind some of these attacks. And finally, we're going to conclude with some tips and strategies by looking at case studies to understand what it takes to have an effective mobile security strategy, both in terms of processes as well as technologies. What does a company need to be thinking about to make sure they're prepared for these types of threats that are either already affecting them today or soon will be affecting them in the very near future. So taking a look at some of the current threats and trends. Like I said, CloudMark's been studying threats in mobile and monitoring the levels of threats in mobile for the past 7 years. And while it's certainly true that the quantity of threats that we see is increasing on a year-by-year basis, what's even more significant is both the severity of the threats that we're seeing as well as the sophistication of the techniques that we're seeing. 7 years ago, the biggest thing people were worried about was spam in their network and more a nuisance type problems. Advertising, maybe a text message they didn't believe they signed up for, and the quantities were relatively low. If we look at the types of threats today, much more severe impact. We're no longer talking about simple nuisance spam and advertising, but we're talking about the types of phishing, malware, and things that are designed to perform fraud and steal people's money. And similarly, the sophistication of the tactics that the fraudsters are using has increased dramatically. It started with very, very simple techniques, stuff that was potentially very, very easy to stop using simple volume controls or keyword blacklisting, to extremely complex techniques where there may be threats going on in your network that potentially you have no idea, because the sophistication, the very low levels that they're using to stay under the radar and make sure they can continue to perform these threats. Just looking at as an example of some of the just a slight shift in change that we're seeing. Every year we CloudMark publishes an annual threat report, so a summary of all the trends that we've seen across all of our operators, across all of our industries. If you just look at 2013 versus 2014, you can even start to see some of the shift in trend there. Phishing attacks have always been one of the top trends that we see, or top types of scams that we see, and there was certainly an increase between 2013 and 2014. But if you look over on the 2014 side, what you can see is that the additional types of threats have not only increased, but in most cases they are scams that are designed to steal money, steal bank account credentials, steal usernames and passwords. So at least 50% of the types of threats we've seen are now designed to be complete scams. So a big shift from simply unwanted advertising, things you didn't sign up for, into the area of very, very high value phishing scams designed to steal your money, steal your passwords. Looking at email to SMS or email to MMS in particular, there's been an interesting shift over the past several years. When we started working with mobile operators 6-7 years ago, email was really where it was at. Everyone had email to SMS gateways. That's where the majority of spam was. Frankly, people really weren't even worried about spam and malware threats through any other vector, because that was the most open vector. The solutions at the time really weren't cutting it. But what happened is, over a period of time, the solutions started to catch up. Everyone put in new anti-spam gateways. They started blocking some of the malware links. And the scammers moved from using email to SMS as the primary threat vector to realizing that mobile-originated messaging was completely unprotected at the time. The big intercarrier providers, Sybase, SAP, had nothing installed. Messages were passed straight through. And it suddenly, for a short period of time, about 3-4 years ago, it became easier to send scams and deliver scams using standard mobile-originated messaging techniques. Things have changed yet again in the past couple of years. Now, all the major intercarrier vendors have closed up those gaps. They've installed sophisticated anti-abuse systems, and none of those are perfect. They've made that a less attractive channel. So literally in the past 1 to 2 years, email to SMS has seen a huge resurgence of activity and is back to being the primary vector that the scammers use to try to contact subscribers. If you just look at some of these graphs right here, just explaining what's in here, the bar chart shows this is data measured through the GSMA spam reporting system that we co-sponsor with the GSMA that I believe many CCA members are also part of. So we track abuse through there. We track the origins of abuse. And if you look at the trends, it's of course increasing as we'd expect. But what's in blue there is the amount of threats that are coming and originating via email to SMS. So while it shows that only about half of the threats are coming from email to SMS, what really makes this stand out is the fact that only about 1% of all messaging traffic actually originates via email to SMS. So even though it's a tiny, tiny portion of the total messaging traffic that operators need to deal with, it represents a massive problem for them and is right now the most vulnerable vector. We just recently did a project with another CCA member working on improving their email to SMS protection gateway. When we finally got everything installed and tuned up, over 99% of the traffic hitting that gateway was spam, fraud, or some type of malware threat trying to attack their subscribers. So it is absolutely wide open, a prime ground for scammers to try to attack mobile operator subscribers. So what does this mean to operators? On the surface, of course, spam complaints are always a problem. You have to take help desk calls from customers who maybe got billed for the SMS message or just frustrated that they received these. And you, of course, do have to process more messages. But that really just scratches the surface of the total impact. SMS is a completely trusted channel. People use it for two-factor bank authentication. Tons of systems out there rely on the fact that we can trust on SMS. We've built that trust as operators for the past 15 years. Any operator campaign that is trying to monetize that trust and generate revenue out of the fact that they have this very trusted messaging channel potentially could be losing revenue because of the fact that SMS is starting to lose its trust as a trusted messaging channel. Looking at operational costs, of course, there's the obvious operational costs of potentially more SMSC capacity to carry this traffic, but the real operational costs come down to the poor guys that have to troll through logs, discover this kind of stuff, do research, handle the case when the CEO got a spam message and they need to deal with that kind of escalation. Those hours add up and become very, very significant when you add up all the individual operational costs. And finally, probably the most important is the potential brand damage. People do trust their cell phones and they associate that with the operator that they purchased their phone from. When SMS is no longer a trustworthy vector, that reflects very, very poorly on the operator and is considered a big factor for one of the reasons why they may jump operator to operator. So looking at how SMS is changing and how that may potentially impact the types of scams that we see. We've all heard the horror stories of SMSs dying, over-the-top messaging is going to take over the world. Everybody's just going to start using WhatsApp or Facebook. And of course, while some of that's true, there is a change for person-to-person messaging is shifting and potentially moving to over-the-top applications. By no means does that mean SMS is dead. Their predictions are that while peer-to-peer messaging for SMS may be on the decline, there is an enormous market for ATP messaging. Tons of predictions out there, they all vary, but most show that potentially by 2016, ATP messaging may potentially outpace current P2P messaging. And the reason is very simple. It's back to that concept that we have a trusted channel that the operators own that can be used to reach subscribers. And major companies are willing to pay for that privilege to be able to contact their subscribers. Banks maybe want to be able to send balance notifications, use that for two-factor authentication, and that's worth money to the operators to be able to charge for the privilege to use that trusted channel. So if you look at A2P traffic, and anytime people talk about A2P traffic, the example that always comes up is something like bank notifications. I want to be notified if my balance drops below a certain value or if there's something questionable about my bank account. So that's over on the left-hand side of the spectrum. Very obvious, no doubt that's something banks are willing to pay for and I'm excited to receive as a subscriber. But if you move across the chain, that's where it starts to get into a gray area. Airline flight delay notifications, that sounds like a pretty good legitimate use of A2P messaging. Marketing, okay, well maybe I signed up for some coupons and that's the kind of stuff I want to see. But things do start to get shady and this A2P messaging has the chance to be abused just like any other messaging channel. Just because A2P messaging is designed to cost money, it may cost 5 cents or 2 cents to contact a subscriber and send them a certified A2P message. That does not mean that it can't be abused. Financial barriers as a barrier to prevent this from being abused, we've seen time and time become ineffective. If you think about something like a phishing scam, where they could break into your bank account and steal $10,000, and it only cost them 2 cents to send out that message, and if they send out 10,000 of those, they could eventually find someone that will fall for the scam. The scammer can make money doing that. So the financial burden of A2P messaging is not a significant barrier. There has to be better controls to be able to do that. This is actually being discussed at the CTIA right now. CloudMark's been contributing to some of the discussions, and what they're trying to do is define these categories a little bit better and put boundaries around them. This class of messaging has to fall within these characteristics. This class falls within these other characteristics, and make it easier for you to automatically and systematically identify what type of traffic may be flowing through your A2P channels. So how else can A2P traffic be abused? Because A2P traffic is a cost center for whoever wants to send these messages and a revenue generator for the operator, anytime there's money involved, there's always someone trying to circumvent the system. That's kind of the general rule of thumb. Once you get money involved, you always find bad actors that try to take advantage of that one way or another. And we already see this happening. The European model for chargeable SMS has been around for quite a while. And in many of these countries, we see this concept of gray traffic. It normally costs several cents to contact a subscriber to do it through one of the legitimate channels, and when that happens, the operator makes some money for that. So what has happened is a cottage industry has grown up processing gray traffic using other means. What they'll do is they'll buy thousands and thousands of SIM cards in these operators that are designed for peer-to-peer messaging. These SIM cards are set up with unlimited messaging plans, and rather than pay money to route messages through the channel that costs 2 cents a message, they'll pump messages through banks and banks of SIM cards with unlimited messaging plans. Now, the people that sign up to do this usually don't know what's happening. There's some very, very large companies that simply go out to the lowest bidder. One guy is charging 2 cents, another guy is charging half a cent, and they will bid to the guy charging half a cent without questioning how he's going to deliver his message. Let's take a look at a couple of different examples that have caused significant impact to some of the operators. Here's some examples of phishing scams. We see these every day. They vary in intensity, they vary in form, but each one of these is designed to steal, not just generate a few cents in revenue by directing someone to a website that's selling Viagra or something annoying, but in this case, designed to steal credentials into a bank account and have a much, much higher impact on the subscriber. Here's an example of a SMS seeded mobile botnet. This was something that first popped up, I believe, at the end of 2013. It's been dubbed Spam Soldier. And the way this worked is the whole botnet was seeded initially through an SMS message. The SMS message enticed people, hey, if you want to download the latest and greatest game, which I think was Grand Theft Auto at the time, you don't need to pay for it. Just go to this website and download the APK file from here. Sure enough people fell for that. They're dying to get it for free. They don't care about Android permissions. They went ahead and downloaded it. And what they did is they downloaded it, became infected, and turned themselves into a mobile botnet. So what did that mobile botnet do? Well, first things it tried to do is spread itself to as many handsets as it could. So it took that same message or similar messages, and it sent those to everyone in your contact book. It also downloaded a list of other addresses that it should send this to and self-propagate to. But once that was done, that was just to seed and build up the mobile botnet. Once that was done, the spammer had to try to generate money out of this. And so what he did is he switched the tactics to start sending spam or account phishing messages. In this case, it was a gift card scam. You go fill out a survey, and the results of those scams, there's varying results. Either they're trying to make money by collecting your information and selling that, or they are trying to hijack your credentials and take over your account for fraud. So we tracked this. It was live, floating around for 3 to 4 months. The infection rate overall, at least in the one larger US operator that we looked at, was still pretty small, only about 10,000 handsets. But this certainly was a pretty huge scare and showed how messaging can be used to propagate malware and continue to cause severe propagation across the network. So here's another example of something that caused relatively significant impact. This is recent, only just from a few weeks ago. Not all scams are run by scammers designed for malicious intent. There are issues in messaging that are completely innocent but can wreak havoc on a network. About 3 weeks ago, someone uncovered a bug in iOS that's been dubbed the effective power bug. What it was is if you send a certain UTF-8 encoded message to an iOS device, you could basically crash the iPhone. Sure enough, this stuff hit the press on May 27th, and it must have been somewhat late because not a whole lot of people discovered this on May 27th, but by May 29th, or May 28th, this was reaching headlines in the US. Front page of USA Today, Wall Street Journal, I saw it on social media, you name it. So of course, what do people do? They do the thing that everyone wants to do. They go ahead and try it out. Gee, wouldn't it be fun to see if I can crash my wife's iPhone? these are actual numbers from an operator in the U.S. where we were tracking how many people were attempting to send this message and crash other phones within the network. On day one, over 750,000 copies of this message were being propagated around the network. Fortunately, we were blocking most of them. So in this case, just imagine that's 750,000 iPhones crashing with a mobile network. If we had not blocked this and prevented that from propagating, that would have almost certainly been piles and piles of calls to the help desk. Why am I getting these messages? Why are you letting my iPhone crash? Fortunately, like this, we were able to contain. But these things happen all the time. Sometimes it's a bug in iOS, a bug in Android, could even be a hoax. Someone spreads a hoax, real simple one that's a, forward this to 10 friends, or a more severe one that is some impending event, and these things spread through the network like wildfire. You need to be prepared for these kind of things. They're completely unpredictable. When they do happen, like it was in this case, suddenly you could have the issue of 700,000 iPhones on your network attempting to crash on a daily basis. Taking a look at the issue of great traffic, revenue loss. This was a study we did for a mobile operator in Europe where they had a established channel of 2 cents per message to contact a subscriber over one of their official channels. We went and started looking at their messaging. Sure enough, without a doubt, we found certain classes of messages that were bypassing those channels. In this case, it was an airline notification that the airline had signed up with a great traffic broker, was bypassing the official traffic stream. Just this one great traffic channel, these airline notifications, we just took that data that we had collected, extrapolated it to do some back-of-the-napkin calculations for the operator to estimate how much money are you losing because people are bypassing this preferred traffic channel that generates you 2 cents per message. And simple back-of-the-napkin math came out to $12 million per year. That's just for one simple great traffic campaign that was bypassing their revenue stream. Taking a look at additional example of malware, this one's from several years ago. Very, very sophisticated attack showing not just a combination of malware on a handset, but a combination of malware on a PC. This is a pretty famous one. Santander Bank started having issues where their online banking systems had been compromised because people's PCs became infected through a Windows-based virus. And that Windows-based virus was doing key logging and detecting when you were trying to log into a Santander Bank website and do banking transactions. So the first thing they did was to fix that was, well, SMS is a trusted channel. We're going to use that for two-factor authentication. Just because you log into the website and the scammer maybe has stolen the password, SMS is reliable. We're going to send a one-time password via SMS, and that should prevent this problem from occurring. Sure enough, the bad guys picked up on this, and what they did is they reacted and encouraged users to download the latest and greatest Santander Bank messaging app to help with security. What that really was a virus that was designed to capture that one-time two-factor authentication code. So at this point, the scammer not only had control of the subscriber's PC, they also had control of their mobile phone. So both factors in the two-factor authentication had been compromised. And they were using this technique to break into banking credentials and drain people's accounts. So what does it mean to have effective mobile messaging strategy? I'm going to talk about this by looking at a couple use cases. Some of the things and trials we've seen, some of the techniques that we've had to learn over time, and we'll try to draw some conclusions out of that. So this is an example of a spam trial that we did in a European country, and we weren't looking at all traffic. We were looking at one specific segment of traffic. Somewhere in Europe, messages heading to somewhere in Asia, they knew that almost all those messages were complete scams. But there was, of course, a little bit of legitimate messaging in that stream. So it's a pretty extreme example. Again, it wasn't looking at all messages, just a tiny, tiny stream of stuff they knew was extremely bad. And it was almost 80% bad stuff. So we started working on installing the systems, taking a look at what we need to do, what we need to stop these threats. We turned on the system, and very, very quickly, based on everything we put in there, we were doing a great job. We identified this stuff, we shut it down, and we're down to really nothing left but a clean traffic stream. This whole period only lasted a couple days, and literally within hours of us figuring out that we have successfully shut down the bad stuff and only let the good stuff through, we started to see some reactions. They had very, very quickly, literally within hours, discovered that we were blocking them, and one of the main reasons was we were sending rejection texts back, or rejections back to the SIM card or to the handset, saying we were unable to deliver your messages, try again later. We sent positive indication back to the scammer, letting them know we're not delivering your message, we believe you're acting in fraud. Sure enough, that gave them evidence to react. They started reacting. We quickly changed our tactics to make it a little bit harder for them to detect that their scams were going through. Rather than rejecting those messages and informing the scammer that their scam was not going through, we switched the system to silently drop those messages. As far as the scammer was concerned, the traffic was now going through. Much, much harder for him to determine that the messages were not making it to the destination. And sure enough, the spam run started to continue, and we were able to effectively block that traffic through filters that remain much, much more static. So one of the lessons here is when you're battling this type of fraud, you do need to realize that the scammers are paying attention. They are going to react, and the easier you make it for them to react, identify that they are being blocked, and give them a chance to react to that, the quicker they are going to be able to react. So you need to approach any messaging strategy somewhat stealthily and make sure that you are just blocking the correct traffic, but potentially letting some of the good stuff get through. Another example of this is many of you probably heard of the term canary account. Scammers are pretty smart. They, if they want to use another technique to figure out that they're being detected, what they do is they set up what are called canary accounts, or target phone numbers at the destination operator. So the really sophisticated ones will purchase handsets across all operators, and when they send out their spam campaign or their phishing or malware campaign, they can use those handsets to detect, did my message make it through, or to get blocked somewhere along the way. The way we circumvent that is to take a look and identify those accounts and not shut them down. We actually intentionally leave them there. And while we may be blocking a scam for the large population of users who are receiving a malware or phishing message, we intentionally let that data go through to the canary account to make sure that, as far as the scammer is concerned, their messages are still making it through. This is another example showing what scammers do to modify messages and make sure they can react to some of the techniques that we throw at them. If you look over on the left-hand side, this again was a trial where we're analyzing a customer's data. And when we first went into the trial, there were really only about 3 major scams going on at the time. And those are represented by those 3 lines at the left. Working with the operator, they were even questioning, once we did the first study, well, why should we be putting in all this fancy technology? Sounds like a lot of effort to stop these 3 scams. Some simple keywords probably could have done the trick. Simple volumetric filters maybe would do the trick as well. Sure enough, we carried on, went ahead and put in the first round of systems to start blocking these threats, and within hours of us putting in the first set of blocking techniques, we started to see a rapid fluctuation in the types of scams that this particular sender was sending out through the messaging stream. It went from 3 scams to tens to hundreds of scams very, very quickly within hours. So clearly they discovered that they were going to be blocked. They had no motivation to use sophisticated techniques in the past, but it wasn't until we started putting filtering in place that they started ramping up. And they must have had their technology, their scripts on deck, ready to go, because literally within hours of us finally getting the systems in place, they started reacting. Another good example of the type of reaction that a scammer can do was looking at email to SMS. This is from a operator in the US. And when we first started looking at their systems, one of the first things we did was take a look at, let's make sure we're tackling the right problem. We use the SRS spam reporting system, something that all CCA members, several have signed up for, all have access to, that lets subscribers report when they've received a unwanted message. And what they also do is they tell you where that message came from. Did it come from a phone number or did it come from an email address? So first thing we were able to do is confirm that email was indeed one of their biggest vulnerabilities in their network. And we went ahead and launched a trial of our new solution to do a better job blocking some of these scams that were coming into their network. Trial was very effective. It lasted several weeks. Throughout that trial, we saw a lot of the same effect that we saw on the last set of slides, where there was constant iteration. They went from relatively simple techniques that were pretty effective to make these scams get through to very, very sophisticated techniques, and fortunately we were able to keep up with most of that. The trial ended, so over on the left-hand side we can see when the trial ended, and what had happened was basically a rebound effect. Over the course of that initial trial, which lasted about 2 months, the sophistication of their techniques increased by 1 to 2 orders of magnitude. Basically, we forced them to become more sophisticated by putting in our own level of sophistication. When we pulled that system out, the level of spam that started hitting their subscribers increased by several orders of magnitude. It was almost as if they had a level of pent-up frustration from doing battle with us for several months that they decided to take it out, and took it out with quite a bit of passion. Fortunately, we were able to finally get everything settled with this operator and put the final production system in place and bring that back under control. So this is not unique to this large operator. We've seen very, very similar campaigns with a smaller operator. We just finished a project with a CCA member at the end of last year. And in that case, fortunately, it only took us a couple weeks to get this implemented, but very, very similar techniques where you see this level of reaction to new filters being put in place. They increase their level of sophistication, but eventually, if you persist enough, you can start to force them out of the network, force them to go find a weaker target, and decrease the level of complexity that is hitting the operator. So just concluding, some of the points that I hopefully drew out through some of the trends we're seeing, as well as a couple of these case studies, is the level of abuse in mobile messaging continues to rise. We all knew this. Mobile messaging is still a preferred method for contacting subscribers, and as a preferred method, it is going to continue to be abused. The sophistication of these attacks is increasing on almost every case. These are financially motivated. I did give the other case of the iOS bug, but in most cases where there's a scammer involved, you can always trace the money trail. They're trying to break into a bank account, they're trying to get you to go to a website and buy something, or they're trying to steal private information and sell that out on the black market. So if you look at the economics of it, there's a cost to sending scams, but then there's the certain profit level. Over the time, one of the things we've all successfully done by implementing effective anti-abuse strategy is we've increased the cost. It's harder and harder to send these scams without being detected, but on the flip side, what we've done is they've tried to increase their profits by sending more and more sophisticated spams and scams to make sure that, given the high cost of what they're doing, they can still make a profit. Scammers are always going to gravitate towards the weakest link. As I mentioned before, we've seen shift from email to SMS, back to mobile originated, and then back to email to SMS again. We've seen it shift from operator to operator. Operator A installs an anti-abuse system. Suddenly their cost to send via operator A becomes very, very high, and the cost to send via operator B becomes very, very low. And sure enough, operator B starts to see scam abuse problems. using a system like SRS has been key to almost everything we do. One of the toughest things to solving abuse problems is understanding what some of the problems are in the first place. One of the first things we almost always recommend is taking advantage of the spam reporting system that we do have an agreement with the CCA. Let your subscribers tell you about the types of things they're seeing. We can use that to for a couple things. We can fine-tune and make sure we're attacking the correct problem, but it also gives you metrics to make sure that you still are continuing to properly solve that problem and things aren't heading in the wrong direction. And then the last learning from this is we need to make sure that these anti-abuse solutions will are ready to evolve very, very quickly. Scammers are going to evolve. They can evolve even faster than we can. They have the luxury of being somewhat haphazard. They don't have to QA test their software, QA test the rules. They don't have to answer to a paying customer. We need to be able to react and be nimble to be able to keep up with their techniques. So just a quick little blurb about CloudMark for anyone who's not familiar with who we are. CloudMark is in the business of providing intelligent network security that protects your most valuable resources. That is, of course, your subscribers. We focus exclusively directly on service providers with about 120 service providers around the world. We do also have a huge enterprise installed base. Most of those are through partners such as Cisco, McAfee, other big names out there, often embed CloudMark technology in some of our solutions. All these types of problems that we've been talking about, we do have a pretty proven track record for solving that. So very interested in hearing what types of problems you may have in your network, whether it be mobile originated spam, ATP messaging, or email to SMS. We've got a pretty proven track record to studying those, cross-referencing them with information that we've already learned, and putting in technology solutions that can help resolve some of these problems. So if you guys are interested in a free trial, we always offer free trials for all of our solutions. So feel free to contact us and we can help you understand what some of your problems are and propose something to solve these. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Lucy, and we'll jump to a little bit of Q&A.
Great, thank you, Mike. And as I go through the questions, if folks have other questions, please remember to fill out the chat function on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll get to your questions as soon as we can. So we do have a first question. For a regional carrier, how would you typically deploy your solution? Is it a hosted or managed solution?
So for a regional carrier, assume you mean someone in the CCA, we actually offer both. We offer software-based solutions that you can install in your network on your own hardware, but certainly for smaller regional carriers such as members of the CCA, many are interested in moving to completely hosted solutions. So we do have hosted versions of most of our products as well, and in that case, you can push all the operational costs directly onto us. For smaller operators such as CCA members, I would definitely recommend considering some of the hosted solutions. In the end, is you can have lower cost of ownership by letting us take care of the operational burden. It's also a lot quicker to implement. I mentioned before we did an email to SMS cutover with one of the CCA members, and that we had completely shifted over, all problems resolved in a matter of weeks with no equipment to install, no software to install. So if the time to get these installed and operational in your network is certainly much, much less if you go hosted.
Great, thanks. Second question. Is each message interrogated before being sent, or does CloudMark look at patterns after messages are sent? If the former, does this cause latency in the delivery of the messages, and what is the latency time frame typically?
Good question. So it's a combination of both. So each message is inspected individually. We inspect it against known campaigns, known threats. We have a very, very large threat database that everybody gets a copy of. So if you find an immediate match, then absolutely we can block that. we do also profile things over time. Sender activity, message content, behavioral activity, not just of the sender, but of the content itself. That's how we detect some of the more sophisticated things going on. In that case, it takes time to detect some of these things. That doesn't mean that we're going to hold on to an SMS message for 5 minutes while we wait and decide what it is. We have to let that through. But what we can do is build up a profile over, a 1 minute period, 5 minute period, and quickly detect that some kind of campaign is going on. So the latency itself, these messages, we understand SMS latency has to be extremely low. People expect to receive their SMS messages within milliseconds. So the whole systems are designed to pass these messages through extremely quickly.
Great, thank you. Next question. You mentioned that bad actors shift from place to place with their campaigns. Why do they do this, and where do they go?
So this all goes down to, you have to think about these guys. They're businessmen, just like any other businessman. They have a cost to doing business, and they're trying to generate revenues to generate profits. So the primary reasons that they shift from place to place, operator to operator, or from spam vector to vector, so email to SMS or mobile originated, is because some barrier has gotten in their way that has caused them to cost more money. If it's very, very difficult to send messages into operator A because they have deployed some very, very extensive anti-abuse systems and detection systems, they're just going to move to operator B. We've seen this trend time and time again. Heritage of email, heritage of CloudMark is that we started in the email anti-spam business over 12 years ago, and we see that shift constantly. They will always gravitate towards the weakest link, and the last guy to come up to speed and get their systems locked down is going to become the weakest one, and that drives lowers their cost and helps drive their profits.
Great, thanks. Next question. Do you have an SS7 Firewall, i.e. anti-spoofing, anti-faking?
We do not. So we do partner with several different companies that offer that as a firewall appliance, and many of them integrate our technology. So spoofing and faking are one, and flooding is one technique that certainly is effective and valuable for an important thing to be blocking and valuable for to have installed. But our focus is more on the much more difficult stuff. Email to SMS scam campaigns where you can only detect this through by looking at the content and the behavior of the subscribers, as well as mobile originated and mobile terminated messaging, where it's completely valid from an SS7 spoofing perspective, but the only way to detect this is to look at the behavior of the subscribers and detect down at the message level, the subscriber level, the message content level, what the activity is that's occurring. Several of our partners offer that. We often go in together. Usually both solutions are required to completely solve all classes of messaging problems.
Great, thanks. Next question. Is spam really that big of a problem, or is it more malware, malicious traffic, and botnets that carriers need to worry about?
From a quantity perspective, spam is still a big problem, but from an impact perspective, yes, it's the latter. Spam, people have kind of become accustomed to the fact that they're going to get annoying things they didn't sign up for, and while that's annoying, it's not nearly as severe as the impact of things like phishing and malware. So from a quantity perspective, botnets, malware still may only represent a few % of all the scams that are out there compared to advertising and annoyance spam, but from an impact perspective, those are the big ones. Those could potentially wreak havoc on your network, wreak havoc on your subscribers, drain entire bank accounts, and have a much more impact than nuisance spam. Great,
thanks. Next question. Do you provide an API for your spam fingerprints database?
Not directly. So it's accessible through our solutions. Our solutions use proprietary technology to analyze every single messages. We use this fingerprinting technology that we've designed for the spam world for over years and years. They are directly accessed through our software, through the algorithms that dissect these, turn them into fingerprints, and then compare them against our global threat network fingerprint database. So indirectly, it's accessible, but only using some of our software and the proprietary fingerprinting algorithms that we've developed.
Great, thanks. So that wraps up all of the questions that we've received so far. If anyone has any questions, feel free to submit them in, and we will also provide CloudMark's information to you all in a follow-up email after the webinar, so you can follow up with CloudMark directly if you have any questions. Mike, any last thoughts or comments for the good of the order?
Yeah, I think the only last comments were some of the things in the conclusion is that this stuff is tough. When you really start getting down into it, you realize how many nasty things are under the cover. So, please involve us. We'll hopefully sort some of that out for you. That's part of the goal, is to try to make this stuff easy for you and make some sense out of all of it.
Great. Well, that concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much to CloudMark and to Mike for sponsoring and for presenting. And feel free to contact CCA should you have any additional questions. And everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you.